This is Hasan Demirel. I'm a professor in Electrical and Electronic Engineering Department of Eastern Mediterranean University. Today I'm going to talk about digital image processing in general, and as part of image processing problems, I'm going to focus into 3D signal processing for biometrics and biomedical applications. As you know, signals are generally used to transmit power as well as data. A very good example for one-dimensional signals is audio signal. The signal that you are hearing at this moment is the audio signal that generated from my voice. As you know, the audio signal is representing data, which is my voice in time. And currently, different voltage levels at different instants of my voice are being transmitted through the media devices like the microphone and through the output devices like a speaker to make you to hear me. In addition to one-dimensional audio signals, we have two-dimensional signals, such as image signals. In 2 dimensions, we have not just the voltage levels in time, we also have the spatial information, which is in horizontal and vertical space. So the 2-dimensional signals can represent images in 2-dimensional space characterized by horizontal and vertical directions. So what's happening there is for every possible point in space, which we call pixels, the data is sampled and quantized to voltage levels, and they are transmitted through the medium. They are acquired by video devices or the image camera devices, and they are being displayed by monitor devices. Having 2-dimensional signals, they can be just on a plane, which are the images, or they can be played in time, in temporal domain, which makes the video devices. So having these cleared up, so we have 1-dimensional signals like audio signals, we have 2-dimensional signals like images, and we have 3-dimensional signals like video of images or video signals. Today I want to focus into 3-dimensional signal processing. And in that respect, I want to focus into the research work that I have undertaken during the process of my lectureship as well as research positions. The applications that I'm going to talk about are biometrics. They are going to be about biometrics and biomedical applications. Namely, I'm going to talk about 3D biometric systems. I'm going to talk about 3D facial expression recognition systems, and I'm going to talk about 3D medical image processing applications. As you know, biometrics is derived from the Greek word bio, which means life, and metric, meaning measure. So the biometrics are the measurement of statistical analysis of the physiological and or behavioral characteristics of human being. Biometrics are mainly used for identification and authentication. Typical biometrics modalities are fingerprint. As you know, fingerprint is unique for a person, and fingerprint can be used to characterize the ID of a person. As well as fingerprints, we have hand. Within hand, we have veins, and within hand, we have lines characterizing the identity of the person. Also, we have iris pattern. As you know, iris patterns are unique and nowadays used a lot for identification. In addition to those, which is very versatile, we have face. So face recognition is used a lot nowadays, and not as common as face and iris or fingerprint. We have DNA fingerprints. Nowadays, the DNA characteristics are there, and they can be used to represent people. All of these that I've been counting are physiological modalities. In addition to these, we have behavioral modalities, which are also coming under biometrics. One of those is gesture. Gesture of a person is specific to the person. So following the gestures of a person, which are characterized by, say, the movements of hand, the movements of arm, the movements of legs, etc., can represent a person. In addition to gesture, we have gait, which is the walking pattern of a person. So having the silhouette of a person who is walking through a corridor, you can recognize the person. In addition to gait and gesture, we have voice. Voice is also unique for a person. We can have the voice, which is one-dimensional audio signal to represent a person, or we can recognize or spot a person through the voice that he or she generates. Also, we have the signature patterns. Signature patterns are also behavioral characteristics, so they can be considered under the behavioral biometric modalities. One of the most important ones, which I have been working on it a lot, is facial expressions. So the facial expressions of every person is unique. My facial expressions when I exhibit during the happiness is not necessarily the same as another person who is showing happiness. So it depends on the face dynamics, which are controlled by the shape of the face as well as the muscles in the face, in addition to the pupil's behavioral characteristics. So having these 3D modalities, and some of those are 2D and some of those are 1D modalities. If we focus into 3D biometric systems, nowadays we have 3D face. 3D face can be used to represent the face in three-dimensional space. It can be 3D surface as well as it can be 3D geometrical descriptors. 3D face are nowadays used for synthesis of faces. So when you have a face and you analyze the face through the analysis processes, you can characterize the three-dimensional parameters, and having the three-dimensional parameters, you can synthesize a face in 3D space. In addition to 3D face, we have 3D palm, so you can recognize the 3D palm of a person. We have nowadays, in addition to 2D fingerprints, we have 3D fingerprints. So not just the 2D print of the finger, but also the shape of the print, which involves the valleys and the lines on the finger, is also important. And a final example is 3D ear. Here I'm going to focus into 3D facial expression more than the other ones, which is one of the research topics that I have undertaken. So as part of the work I have developed with my PhD students, we have developed a system which is 3D facial expression recognition system utilizing local face descriptors. Here the face descriptors are actually three-dimensional. Actually, they are three-dimensional distance vectors, which are the distances on the important landmarks that we have selected on the face. And here, after having the 3D distance vectors, there are so many of them, having 83 facial descriptors available on MPEG-4 standard. There are thousands of possible distances. What we do in one of the earlier works that we developed, we analyze all of the possible distances, which are in thousands, and we do selection. And based on the selected facial, selected distances, we characterize the faces, hence the facial expressions, by using these selected distances. We also developed a method which is coarse-to-fine classification scheme, where we use these distances to come up with a subset of facial expressions, and then from the subsets, or let's say groups, we go deeper into each group, and we, from coarse-to-fine manner, classify the expression. Talking about one of the earlier works that we developed, which is the 3D distance-based method, we actually, first thing first, we do face detection, then we do head and pose estimation, and if necessary, we do head and pose correction. Then, after detecting the geometric landmarks, we go for the distances, possible distances that can characterize the face. And having these distances, then we do an analysis where we study which distances are the most important distances to characterize the facial expressions. When I talk about facial expressions, I'm talking about the 6 basic expressions, which are anger, disgust, fear, happy, sadness, and surprise. In addition to these 6 expressions, we have neutral expression as well. So what we do, when we have all of these distances, we go for an analysis process where we find the most important distances, which are most informative and most discriminative in characterizing these 6 basic expressions. In order to be able to do that, we use MPEG-4 standard, where there are 83 different landmarks, and there are 44 different action units describing the basic expressions. In these action units, we study openness of the eye based on some of the distances that we developed. We study height of eyebrows, we study openness of mouth, we study width of mouth, we study stretching of lip, and we study openness of jaw. So in doing that, we have developed 6 basic distances, which are to characterize every single of these action units. And once we have these distances calculated, we can use these distances to recognize the expression on a face. One of the other methods that we developed is actually using genetic algorithm, where we study all of the distances, as I told you earlier, and we find the most discriminative distances characterizing the facial expressions. And the sub-distances, the number of distances here, out of thousands of possible distances, is reduced down to 24. So instead of having all possible distances to characterize face, we are choosing the most discriminant 25 distances to maximize the classification performance, where we recognize, hence characterize, hence classify 6 basic expressions. One of the other methods that we developed is to use coarse-to-fine classification scheme, where instead of going classification for 6 basic classes, we have studied the clusters representing these 6 basic classes in feature space. When we studied the clusters, we realized that surprise is coming into one region, where anger, sadness, and neutral comes into another cluster. They are all mixed up together, and disgust, fear, and happiness comes on another cluster. So having the feature space studied, we have spotted 3 different clusters, where instead of 6 basic classes, we study these 3 different clusters first. So given a face, we find which group he or she falls into. If he or she is from group 1, that's surprise. If he or she is from group 2, we go for another classification, where we, from coarse to fine manner, detect from group 2 if the person is angry, sad, or neutral. If the person falls under group 3 cluster, we do another level of classification, where the person is down classified to disgust, fear, and happiness. All of these methods that we developed added improvement to the literature, and the standard literature performances are code, or we generated improved performances. One of the latest work that we had in 3D facial expression recognition was using scale invariant feature transform features, and instead of having all of these sift features all around the face, we localized them to regions of interest on the face. For example, we have localized features around the nose, mouth, and eye, and we have given more weight to those features from those regions than the features from elsewhere. The reason is that those features coming from mouth, nose, and eye regions are more informative and more discriminant than any other feature on the face. The latest work that we are working is beyond these 3D methods, where we only use static images. We are also using deep learning techniques recently, where we are studying the facial expressions in time. So we are studying video, and when we study video, as you know, video signals not only contain the visual signals in time, but also audio signals in time. Having convolutional neural network structures, we are studying 3D-dimensional video analysis, where we select the most discriminative frames of video to characterize a facial expression of a video. And in doing that, we are using k-means clustering, where we detect the most discriminative frames out of countless number of frames, and we use those frames to characterize face. The number of frames are down to 9, which makes the extraction very efficient, and we get rid of redundancies a lot. Once we have the video frames, selected video frames, we also utilize the respective audio frames in parallel. So once you have video selection finalized, in parallel to that, we select or we gather the audio corresponding to this video frame instances, and we do facial expression recognition both in video and audio. Then, having results in audio and having results in video using 3D CNN, we combine them through facial expression. We combine them through data fusion techniques. I think this is enough for the facial expression recognition. I also want to talk about the 3D medical imaging systems that we developed. As you know, 3D imaging is an important field of interest in biomedicine. We have 3-dimensional scans of brain, 3-dimensional heart, 3-dimensional lung, 3-dimensional kidney, skull, and ultrasound. We have developed a number of work in 3-dimensional brain processing, where we have studied the ways in which we can recognize Alzheimer's disease. And in order to be able to do that, we have studied 3-dimensional structural MRI images, where in these approaches, we developed processes where we localize the volume of interests I'm not saying region of interest like in 2D, I'm saying volume of interest in 3D. We have isolated volume of interests in the brain which are unique for Alzheimer's disease patients. So we have achieved this by analyzing hundreds of AD, Alzheimer's disease patients, and healthy people's brains. And having those volume of interests determined, we have extracted statistical representations from those volume of interests. One of the earlier methods, one of the most influential methods that we developed, we have used very simple probability distribution function-based feature vectors extracted from those volume of interests, and we have performed classification of Alzheimer's disease from the healthy control. Because it's a binary classification, you can also call this Alzheimer's disease detection. Our later work, currently we are focusing on to deep learning approaches, determining the Alzheimer's disease as well as Parkinson's disease, and we are using more sophisticated structures, or let's say systems, like convolutional neural networks, which are capable of extracting 2D or 3D features, as well as perform classification throughout the process. And our current results are very promising. We are generating improved results, and we are on the process of publishing those three-dimensional processes that we developed for Alzheimer's as well as Parkinson's disease detection. I can also talk about the future prospects, because these two different, let's say, research interests that I have portrayed, they are, as you can recall, facial expression recognition in 3D, and Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease detection in 3D. There are a lot of other directions. People nowadays are modeling heart, lung, and also they are modeling veins, and they are doing analysis on anomaly detections in these mediums. So there are a lot of prospects in that direction. Also, the deep learning schemes are very promising. It's a very hot research topic. People are working on 2D as well as 3D convolutional neural network type of state-of-the-art architectures to perform improved performances in the domain. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope I've been useful as I tried my best to pass the research processes that I've been undertaking for the last decade. Thank you very much.